Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. And many more. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I am your host today, Shantae Charles. I hope that you are having a great and wonderful day. I want to share with you some affirmations that we have been doing this week on my personal page. The first affirmation is I enjoy growing. It revitalizes me, and growth is necessary. The second, my mindset lives in the space of abundance. Abundance is my portion, and I will always be abundant. The third, I dip into my jar of joy and replenish my soul through good thoughts and good memories. I think those are all positive and powerful affirmations that we can say and keep in our memory. Today's affirmation for me is I will keep going and moving, moving in love, moving in joy, moving in peace, and moving in happiness. So, I want to say good morning to those of you all who are coming in. Let me see if I can. Okay. Just making sure that there was not an emergency happening. All right. So we are going to be on this Thinking Thursday, moving back into the book on forgiveness, failures of forgiveness, what we get wrong, and how to do better. I don't know about you, but since I have started reading this book, and we're actually about halfway through it, which is great, because this week we'll be taking a break at the end of this week, and then we will return in January. So it'll be just in time to work on the other half of this book. But since I have been reading this book, it has been encouraging. It has been helping me to solidify some things about why I think about forgiveness in the way that I think about it. And hopefully, it has challenged you to really look at the concept of forgiveness, how we utilize that concept of forgiveness, how we interact with each other when it comes to forgiveness, how we deal with people who have offended us when it comes to forgiveness. My husband, I was in the salon and I shared a little briefly about this on yesterday on my Black Table Talk page. But I was in the salon yesterday doing a little bit of self care, doing my mani pedi and just preparing to be more festive for the holy day season. And I got a call from my husband. And that call was that the police had been called on him while he was picking up some large packages that had come in from UPS. And he parked and he double parked, not in a handicapped space like that, but he just double parked so that he would have enough space to wheel the things out and load them into the car. Well, as he was going into the postage place, some, you know, enveloping Karenish woman decided that she wanted to start screaming at him and yelling at him at the top of her lungs and trying to draw attention, and because he had double parked. Now, mind you, this is a huge parking lot with plenty of spaces. There's always plenty of spaces, and there are several hundreds of spaces. But she felt emboldened, took it upon herself to start this whole ranting and raving. Well, my husband, he's the kind of person that he is not going to engage you in your foolishness. So my husband kept walking and went into the UPS, got his packages, was loading them up. And when he came back outside, there was a police car parked behind his vehicle, saying that they had been called to the scene because of a disturbance. Well, thankfully, it was a police officer that had common sense. And this black police officer asked my husband what was the problem, what was going on. Of course, the person who had done the calling had already disappeared. So my husband said, this lady was yelling at me and she was screaming about me double parking. And of course, the officer probably rolled his eyes, but the officer just said, "Sir, when you get a chance," because it was obvious that my husband had packages, you know, visually obvious. He said, "Sir, when you get a chance, just try to park straight." The officer got back in his car, did not escalate something that didn't need to be escalated, and drove off. Now, I could have taken that and said, I'm never gonna forgive this person. But was that a forgivable moment? This person has already gone and done their dirt. They've tried to weaponize police and they've tried to weaponize law enforcement against my husband, and then they disappeared. We probably will never see that person again. How is there any way to address what that person did with that person? Well, the answer is no. There's no way to address that. So, do you hold on to it or do you let it go? Well, we let it go. I know I did. And you know how I let it go? I put it into the hands of the divine. And I said, "God, may the universe give her everything she deserves for what she did in that moment." It's out of my hands. It's above me now. It's into the divine plane and the spiritual laws of reaping and sowing at this point. So I can move on. And one of the things that this book talks about is it talks about what are some things that you might not need the process of forgiveness for. And then what are some things that, yeah, you really do need to go through a process of forgiveness. Now, we're talking in her chapter 6 on the chapter entitled Home Improvement. And she's talking about common problems relative to forgiveness. And the problem we're talking about today is what she calls the pace problem. The pace problem. Now, we might get to the next problem, but we're going to make sure that we cover the pace problem today. All right, here we go. The pace problem concerns how quickly a relative forgives. And this is specifically talking about forgiveness in the family context. The pace problem concerns how quickly a relative forgives. A family member with a pace problem is likely to think that family forgiveness should occur quickly or at least sooner rather than later. And this is in part because they have accepted the fact that forgiveness is a process rather than a discrete action. They often erroneously think that saying makes it so, that we only need to utter the magic words and all will be well again. Those with a pace problem are likely to be impatient with a family victim or to experience what I refer to as fallout fatigue. Fallout fatigue occurs when a person is tired of unresolved conflict and anxious to have it addressed. Unable to handle the ongoing tension, Unable to handle the ongoing tension, they can become increasingly impatient and desperate. If a victim experiences fallout fatigue, she or he may forgive too quickly. If a relative of a victim experiences it, they may pressure the victim to hurry up and forgive. Waiting can lead to feelings of uncertainty or uneasiness, and such impatience and fatigue are likely to cause additional conflict. Those with a pace problem might accuse the aggrieved party of being bitter, petty, and unfair for holding out. These accusations can create animosity and lead the victim to feel defensive and withdraw from the family. Victims may be hurt by their relatives' impatience, thinking it insensitive and uncompassionate. Family members may be hurt by their relatives' pace, thinking it vindictive and inconsiderate. Those with a pace problem are also likely to settle for or pressure others to engage in a superficial repair that doesn't adequately deal with the underlying issues. According to the psychologist and family counselor Paul Coleman, we must be careful about when and how forgiveness is introduced in the wake of a conflict. He notes that if it's introduced prematurely, the victim may rebel because it places the burden of resolving conflict on their shoulders. He acknowledges that he introduces the topic only once progress has been made in the sessions. That is, when some level of trust has been restored and communication has been improved. And he cautions therapy practitioners not to discuss forgiveness immediately. We can apply his professional advice to our interpersonal worlds. It is easy to understand why, in the aftermath of family conflict, many rush to talk about forgiveness or expect the party who has been wronged to quickly extend it. Family is important for many of us. Our hearts break over threats that our families could fall apart. However, regardless of our good intentions, this impatience for forgiveness has significant problems, akin to the problems presented by the hurry and bury ritual I discussed in Chapter 5. Quickly asking and expecting forgiveness from those we love can disrespect and endanger them. We should instead put in practice the wait and relate principle. This principle involves waiting for our loved ones to forgive, refusing to put them on our own forgiveness schedule. The fact that I have forgiven a hitherto beloved auntie for a transgression doesn't mean that my siblings or cousins should do so at the same pace. Waiting is about communicating to our relatives that the decision to travel the road to forgiveness, as well as the pace of their journey, is up to them. When we wait, we acknowledge and respect the fact that everyone has their own process and that each person will experience the wrongdoing in different ways. Given this diversity of experience, some will naturally take longer than others to forgive or want to forgive. To understand what we should and shouldn't do while we wait, let's consider an analogy. Think about the last marathon you watched, assuming you have the patience to do such a thing. You may have noticed runners leading a pack and then dropping out after some distance. Those runners are known as pacemakers or rabbits. They help runners stay at a speed that they can manage for the 26 miles of the race. And they know this speed because they have trained with members of the pack. Their job is not to win the race, it's to set a pace with the hopes that team members finish at their personal best. Now, that is actually a pretty awesome description of what spiritual leaders should be like. The same role applies to us as family members. We should do our best to help our loved ones on the long road to forgiveness. Get there at the pace that they, not we, can manage. And we might have some clue concerning that pace because we have talked with them, we have empathized with them, and we know their strengths and weaknesses and difficulties. But our job is not to rush our relatives to forgive, nor is it to beat them to forgiveness as if it's a competition. Our job is to help them to do their best. We can help them do it at their pace. But then, like Kenyan runner Uliad Kipchoge's rabbits did when he completed a record marathon in under 2 hours, it's best for us to get out of the way and let them do their best. This is a form of waiting, but far from being passive, it is active waiting. As we wait, we are not doing nothing. Instead, we cautiously and lovingly do what we can to help open up the possibilities for their forgiveness by, for instance, reiterating that what happened to them was not okay, listening to their struggles, extending kindness, offering support, and respecting their boundaries. Relating is about showing concern and compassion. It's about trying to understand the pain and difficulties of those who can't forgive as soon as we think they should. Often relating makes it easier to wait. For example, as Coleman notes, if you discover that the intensity of a spouse's anger towards you for some transgression is explained in part by their mother or father often having done the same things you did, this can help you understand why forgiveness might be taking your spouse longer than it reasonably would. Relating will help you see that perhaps they need to forgive their parents first before they can forgive you, which may make it easier to wait for forgiveness. At other times, waiting will help you to relate. As you wait for forgiveness, certain things may reveal themselves to you. You might be reminded of how you have been hurt by others in the past and that it took you some time to get through it and forgive. If it happened to you, then you can be patient when the shoe is on the other foot. You might begin to realize how insensitive or selfish that you're being in expecting a quick forgiveness, and then decide to do better as a result. The time you take to reflect can lead to empathy, and empathy can lead to relating better. A variety of things go by the name empathy. The philosopher Samuel Fleischaker distinguishes two main camps: contagious empathy and projective empathy. We typically think that empathy involves feeling or sharing in the emotions of others, which is the contagious part, or imagining ourselves in the situations of others, which is the projective part. I am apt to think that projective empathy is more helpful than contagious empathy when it comes to relating. Simply catching the sadness of my loved ones will not help me relate to them better. I can catch sadness by simply witnessing my stepbrother's tears without knowing anything about what caused the sadness. But such knowledge and understanding is important to relating to them. Projective empathy, however, requires me to know how and why he is sad. It requires us to attend to the entire character and perspective of the person rather than just their momentary experience. It requires not merely that we listen to the other person, but that we ask the questions whose answers need to be listened to. Empathy requires inquiry as much as imagination. When we ask questions, when we listen to answers, when we aim to know the person and the full circumstances, that, when we are empathizing, we are able to relate more to our hurting relatives. Empathy thus plays an important role in the wait and relate cycle. When we are impatient, tired of being reminded about our past, or feel ourselves getting resentful about our relatives' persistent resentment, we should remind ourselves to wait and relate. Waiting and relating might not get us the instant gratification we think we desperately need, but in this case, the adage is true. Good things do come to those who wait. And when we come back from our break, we'll still be in this book and we'll be looking at the protection problem, the protection problem. And that will conclude chapter 6. But I want to leave some room for us to have our talk back. So if you are on YouTube, please join us for the talk back on our Instagram page at Daring Dialogues, all one word. Go over there and subscribe and like that page, right? If you're on Instagram, you can find us there. I want to thank you for your time and attention. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness, so continue to go out and be light. And hopefully, I'll see you on tomorrow. Take care and be well.